Imagine a country that looks like a fantasy screensaver. Mountains falling straight into the ocean, deep blue fjords cutting through the land. Tiny villages surrounded by cliffs, northern lights above snowy towns. Clean cities, quiet streets, rich people, almost no chaos, and one of the highest standards of living on Earth. That is the Norway most people. Imagine a perfect cold paradise, but Norway is much more complicated than that. This is a country that became incredibly rich not by chasing glamour, but by making some of the most disciplined economic decisions in the modern world. A country with only about 5.5 million people, but one of the largest sovereign wealth funds on the planet. A country that sells oil and gas to the world, yet presents itself as one of the cleanest and most environmentally conscious societies in Europe. It is peaceful, but not easy. Rich, but extremely expensive. Beautiful, but harsh. Safe, but not a utopia. Open, but socially difficult to enter. Norway is one of those countries people admire from far away without fully understanding what life there actually costs, financially, socially, and psychologically. Today, we're going to look at the real Norway. Not just the fjords, not just the northern lights, not just the happiest country headlines. We'll talk about how Norway got rich, why its oil money did not destroy it, why everything is so expensive, how people actually live, why moving there is much harder than many foreigners expect, what the dark side of this country looks like, and why Norway is not really trying to impress anyone, because Norway is not a flashy country. Norway is a system, and that system works because it was built on discipline. The first thing to understand is that Norway is small in population, but huge in resources. Only about 5.5 million people live there. That is less than the population of many American states. But this small population controls a long coastline, massive natural resources, rich fisheries, hydropower, and most importantly, oil and gas from the North Sea. That last part changed everything. Before oil, Norway was not the ultra-rich country people imagine today. It was a tough northern society built around fishing, shipping, farming where possible, and surviving in a landscape that did not make life easy. The mountains, fjords, cold weather, and long distances shaped the country deeply. Then oil was discovered offshore in the second half of the 20th century, and Norway suddenly had a choice. It could spend the money quickly, inflate the economy, create a corrupt elite, and become another country ruined by resource wealth. Or it could treat oil as a temporary gift and save much of it for the future. Norway chose the second option. That decision may be the most important reason modern Norway is so rich. The country created what most people call the Norwegian Oil Fund, officially the government pension fund global. It is one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Instead of dumping all oil money directly into the economy, Norway invests a huge share of it globally. Stocks, bonds, real estate, international assets. The idea is simple. Oil will not last forever, but the wealth it creates should support the country for generations. This is the opposite of short-term thinking, and that is why Norway is so different from many other resource-rich countries. Oil did not become the whole identity of the state. It became a tool. The government is limited in how much of the fund it can use each year. That rule prevents politicians from simply spending everything to win popularity. It forces the country to think long-term. For Americans, this is one of the strangest things about Norway. In the United States, politics often feels like a fight over the next election cycle. In Norway, the national mindset is much more patient, not perfect, not magical, but patient. Norway understood something that many rich countries forget. Wealth is not just about making money. It is about not being stupid with it. That is why the oil fund became almost a symbol of the country's personality: quiet, careful, conservative in the old sense. Not flashy, not emotional, built for tomorrow. But here is the twist: Norway is rich. But it is not cheap rich, it is expensive rich. That difference matters. If you look at Norwegian salaries, they can seem impressive. Workers often earn strong wages compared with many countries, but the cost of living is brutal. Food is expensive, restaurants are expensive. Alcohol is extremely expensive, services are expensive. Housing in Oslo and other major cities can be painful. Even simple everyday life can feel overpriced to foreigners. This shocks Americans who imagine moving to Norway and instantly living like kings. That is not how it works. You may earn more, but you also spend more, and taxes take a serious share of your income. Norway has high taxes and a large welfare state. But, like in other Nordic countries, the logic is not simply the government takes your money. The logic is that society pays heavily into a shared system, and in return people receive stability. Health care, education, child benefits, parental leave, unemployment, protection, pensions, public services, strong labor rights. A society where falling down does not usually mean falling forever. This is the Nordic deal. You give up some personal financial upside, but you reduce personal disaster risk. In America, a person might make more money, but also live closer to financial danger. A medical bill, job loss, or child care costs can completely change a family's life. In Norway, the state absorbs more of that risk, but again, this does not mean life is free. It means life is managed differently. Norway is not a country built around extreme wealth displays. It is not Miami. It is not Dubai. It is not Los Angeles. Showing off too much can actually feel socially uncomfortable there. The culture values modesty, personal space, and not acting like you are more important than everyone else. This can feel refreshing. It can also feel cold because Norwegian society is not easy to enter. People are polite but often reserved. They respect privacy. They do not usually make instant friendships with strangers. They do not perform friendliness in the American way. In the US, someone might smile, chat, and act familiar after 5 minutes. In Norway, that kind of energy can feel fake or invasive. Norwegians are not necessarily unfriendly. They are just not socially loud. Friendship often takes time. Trust takes time. Belonging takes time, and for immigrants, this can be one of the hardest parts of life in Norway. Not the cold, not the prices, loneliness. Many foreigners arrive expecting a wealthy paradise and discover that social life is much slower than they imagined. You can have a good apartment, a stable job, clean streets, and beautiful nature and still feel isolated. That is the part Instagram does not show. Norway can be emotionally difficult. Especially during winter, the darkness is real. In parts of the country, winter days are extremely short. In the far north, the sun may not rise for weeks. Even in the south, the cold, darkness, rain, snow, and gray skies can weigh heavily on people who are not used to them. Americans from California, Florida, Texas, or almost anywhere sunny may underestimate this completely. Norwegian winter is not just a season. It is a psychological environment. You need routines, you need discipline, you need outdoor habits. You need to learn how to live with darkness instead of waiting for it to end. That is why Norwegians spend so much time outdoors, hiking, skiing, cabins, mountains, forests, fishing, walking, cold air, silence. These are not just hobbies. They are part of the national survival system. Norway's relationship with nature is not decorative. Nature is not something people visit once a year. For vacation, it is part of daily identity. And that makes sense when you look at the country. Norway's geography is extreme. The coastline is long, broken, and dramatic. Fjords cut deep into the land like giant wounds filled with seawater. Mountains cover much of the country. Flatland is limited. Many towns are squeezed between steep slopes and water. This makes Norway stunning, but it also makes it expensive to build and connect. Roads, tunnels, bridges, ferries, railways, airports, everything has to fight the landscape. Moving people and goods across Norway is not simple. A short distance on the map may require tunnels, mountain passes, ferry crossings, or long detours. That is why infrastructure in Norway can be impressive and costly at the same time. The country has built tunnels under mountains and roads along impossible coastlines because it had to. In a flatter country, transport is a matter of planning. In Norway, transport is a battle with geology. The fjords are beautiful, but they are also barriers. The mountains are iconic, but they isolate communities. The coastline gives opportunity, but also creates distance. This is why Norway feels so different from many European countries. It is not a dense, easy, soft landscape. It is a country where nature constantly reminds people who is really in charge. And yet, Norway turned that harshness into strength. Hydropower is a huge part of the country's energy system. Rivers, waterfalls, mountains, and rainfall give Norway enormous renewable electricity potential. That means much of the country's domestic electricity comes from water power. At the same time, Norway sells oil and gas abroad. This creates a strange contradiction. Norway is one of the most environmentally conscious countries in daily life. Electric vehicles are everywhere. Clean energy is central to national identity. Nature protection matters deeply. People recycle, conserve, and talk seriously about sustainability. But the country's wealth was built heavily on fossil fuels. That tension is unavoidable. Norway is green at home and a major energy exporter abroad. This does not make Norway fake, but it does make Norway complicated. The country is trying to manage the transition carefully, because oil and gas still matter enormously to the economy. They support jobs, exports, state revenue, and the fund that protects the future. So Norway faces a difficult question. How does a country built partly on oil become a post-oil society without damaging the system that made it so stable? That question will shape Norway's future because oil will not carry the country forever. Norway knows this. That is why the fund exists. That is why the country invests. That is why there is serious debate about diversification, technology, green industry, shipping, seafood, and energy transition, but knowing the problem does not make it easy. Now let's talk about work and daily life. Norway has a strong labor market, low unemployment by international standards, and high wages. Workers have rights. Work-life balance is taken seriously. People are not expected to destroy themselves for a job in the way that is often normalized in the United States. Vacation matters. Family time matters. Leaving work on time is not automatically seen as laziness. This can be shocking for Americans used to a culture where overwork is often treated like a personality trait. In Norway, the system assumes that life is not only about work. But there is another side. The labor market can be hard to enter if you are not already inside the system. For foreigners, especially non-Europeans, Norway is not an easy immigration country. You usually need a real reason to be there. A skilled job, study, family reunification, or another legal path. The country is not trying to attract anyone and everyone. Norway is selective. If you are highly skilled, educated, and have a job offer, the process can be possible. If you want to arrive and figure it out, it will be much harder. Low-skilled migration from outside Europe is very limited. Employers often prefer people who already understand the language, culture, and work environment. English helps, especially in international sectors, technology, academia, oil and gas, and some corporate jobs, but English is not enough for real integration. Norwegian matters a lot. Many Norwegians speak excellent English, but that does not mean you can build a full life in Norway without learning Norwegian. Government systems, local jobs, social life, schools, community life. Language opens doors that English cannot. This is where many immigrants get stuck. They can survive in English, but they cannot fully belong. And Norway is not a country that automatically pulls you in. You have to make the effort. Housing is another serious challenge. In Oslo, rent can be very high, deposits can be large. Competition can be difficult for newcomers without local references, stable income, or credit history. Finding a decent place can be stressful, and once you are inside the country, the cost of normal life keeps reminding you that Norway is not a cheap dream. A coffee, a sandwich, a beer, a taxi ride, a dinner out. Things that might feel casual elsewhere can feel like financial decisions in Norway. This is why many Norwegians live practically. They cook at home, they spend time outdoors, they go to cabins. They do not necessarily consume in the same way as Americans. Norway is rich, but it is not built around endless consumption. It is built around stability. That stability shows up in safety. Norway remains one of the safest countries in the world. Violent crime is low. Gun violence is rare. Trust in institutions is high. In smaller towns, people often live with a level of calm that would feel almost unreal in many parts of the United States. Children walk alone. People trust public systems. Police are not constantly visible. Daily life feels controlled and low pressure, but Norway is not crime-free. Large cities, especially Oslo, have areas with more social problems. Youth crime, drug issues, and petty crime, pickpocketing can happen. Some neighborhoods deal with integration challenges, unemployment, and tension between groups. Like many European countries, Norway has had to confront the fact that immigration and integration are not the same thing. Most immigrants live normal, law-abiding lives and contribute to the country. But in some areas, social isolation, poverty, weak language skills, and lack of opportunity have created problems that Norwegian society is still learning how to handle. This is an uncomfortable topic in Norway, because the country values equality and social trust. But ignoring the problem does not solve it. The real issue is not simply who arrives, it is whether people can actually integrate into a system that depends heavily on shared rules, trust, and responsibility. Norway's social model works because most people believe in it. They pay high taxes because they trust the system they follow. Rules because they expect others to follow them too. They accept limits because those limits apply broadly. If trust weakens, the model becomes harder to maintain. That is why integration matters so much in Norway. Not because Norway is fragile in the dramatic sense, but because its strength depends on social cohesion. The country is like a very well-built machine. But every machine has assumptions. Norway assumes trust. Norway assumes discipline. Norway assumes people will not abuse the system. Norway assumes that personal freedom comes with social responsibility. When those assumptions hold, the country works incredibly well. When they weaken, the problems become visible fast. Another hidden challenge is that Norway can feel too orderly for some people. That may sound strange, but it is real. The same calm that makes Norway attractive can also make it feel emotionally flat. There is less chaos, but also less spontaneity. Less danger, but sometimes less intensity. Less noise, but sometimes less warmth. For some people, that is paradise. For others, it becomes suffocating. Norway does not give you constant stimulation, it gives you space. And you have to know what to do with that space. This is why some foreigners fall in love with Norway and others leave after a few years. It depends on what you are looking for. If you want sunshine, nightlife, cheap restaurants, easy friendships, and a fast social rhythm, Norway may disappoint you. If you want safety, clean nature, order, good public services, quiet, long-term stability, and a slower life, Norway may feel like one of the best places on Earth. But the country will not adapt itself to your expectations. You adapt to Norway, or you leave. That is the honest version. Tourism is different, of course. As a traveler, Norway can be breathtaking. The fjords, mountains, northern lights, coastal towns, scenic roads, and Arctic landscapes are unforgettable. But even tourism is not easy in the casual sense. It is expensive. Weather can change quickly. Distances are long. Hiking can be dangerous if you are unprepared. Nature here is not a theme park. Every year, tourists underestimate Norwegian landscapes. They wear the wrong clothes, ignore weather warnings, hike beyond their ability, and assume that a beautiful place is automatically a safe place. That is a mistake. In Norway, nature is beautiful because it is powerful, and powerful things require respect. This may be the deepest lesson of the country. Norway is not built on domination over nature. It is built on adaptation to nature. Small towns fit into the landscape. Roads bend around mountains. Homes are built for climate. People plan around weather. Life slows down when conditions demand it. This is very different from the American instinct to conquer space, expand outward, and build bigger. Norway's mindset is more restrained. It asks, what can we build here without breaking the place? Not always perfectly, of course. Norway has industry, roads, oil platforms, urban development, and environmental conflicts like anywhere else, but culturally, nature has a kind of authority. That authority shapes the people. Norwegians are often described as reserved, practical, calm, and independent. Some of that is stereotype, but some of it comes from geography and history. In a harsh land, drama is less useful than competence. Complaining does not fix weather. Showing off does not move snow. Panic does not cross a mountain. You prepare. You endure. You keep things under control. That is Norway. And that is why the country's wealth feels different from the wealth of many other places. It is not loud wealth. It is not gold towers and luxury malls. It is functional wealth. Good roads through impossible terrain, strong schools, clean hospitals, reliable electricity, public trust, low corruption. A fund for the future. A society where ordinary people can live with dignity. That is the real flex, not looking rich, being stable. But stability has a price. High taxes, high costs, social pressure to conform. Difficult immigration, emotional distance, long winters. Dependence on oil wealth, a changing society trying to preserve trust. A future that must move beyond fossil fuels without breaking the economic model. Norway is not perfect. It is not some magical northern utopia where all problems disappear. It is a serious country that made serious choices, and that is why it works better than most. The truth is, Norway is not impressive because it has oil. Many countries have resources. Norway is impressive because it did not completely waste them. It turned a temporary natural advantage into long-term national security. It built institutions that people mostly trust. It kept inequality lower than many rich countries. It protected workers. It invested in the future. It treated wealth as responsibility, not just opportunity. That is rare, and maybe that is why Norway feels so different. It does not try hard to entertain you. It does not sell itself aggressively. It does not need to convince you that it matters. It simply exists according to its own logic. Quiet, expensive, disciplined, beautiful, cold, rich, reserved, and difficult to fully understand for Americans. Norway can feel like a mirror held up to a completely different idea of success. In America, success often means more money, more house, more attention, more speed, more freedom to do whatever you want. In Norway, success often means enough security, enough trust, enough time, enough balance, enough respect for the common system. That difference is huge, and whether you admire it or dislike it, Norway forces you to think. Maybe wealth is not only about how much you can buy. Maybe freedom is not only about how little the state interferes. Maybe safety, trust, time, health, and quiet are also forms of wealth. But maybe those things also require sacrifice. Norway gives a lot, but it asks a lot too. It asks you to accept high costs, high taxes, social rules, darkness, patience, and a culture that does not open immediately. That is why Norway is not what many people think. It is not a fantasy. It is not a cold paradise. It is not just fjords and northern lights. It is a disciplined society built on harsh geography, resource wealth, social trust, and long-term thinking, and once you understand that, Norway becomes even more interesting. Not because it is perfect, but because it proves something rare. A country does not need to be loud to be powerful. It does not need a huge population to matter. It does not need to spend all its wealth to be rich, and it does not need to impress you to be one of the most stable societies on earth. Norway is not trying to be easy. Norway is trying to last, and that may be the most Norwegian thing of all. If you found this story interesting, like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead about countries that look simple from far away but become much stranger once you look closer. See you next time.